Hello, and welcome to SecureTalk, a podcast where we explore the critical world of information security innovation and compliance. I'm your host, Justin Beals, founder and CEO of StrikeGraph. Together with our expert guests, we'll provide you tools and tips to help your business thrive in the rapidly evolving cybersecurity environment. Like many of you, I have been involved and engaged in this development of AI tools for many, many years. When I first started working on data science, we called it algorithmic programming, and most of the work that we did was in service of effective search algorithms and the ability to locate and find information quite quickly. That morphed over time into predictors, into systems that could make a prediction, anything from, in my world, the correlation between types of content, the ability to understand large data ontologies and classification systems, and eventually through to natural language processing, synthesis of audio to text, and even later on, the ability to analyze large amounts of unstructured data for correlation with existing population cohorts. Data science, AI, and machine learning have been a part of my computer science journey since very early on in my career. But there are certain situations where I've used AI where I was very concerned about the applicability and the efficacy of what we were doing. Certainly, one of the most sensitive areas for AI utilization is in medical care. And today, we see a lot of opportunity and a lot of nervousness about the ability of AI tools to be included in software as a medical device or software as a part of our medical care solution. It's for that reason today that we wanted to interview Dr. Paul Campbell. Dr. Paul Campbell is the head of software and AI at the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency in the UK. He is an experienced medical executive with over 2 decades of clinical experience in various disciplines. Paul has held senior roles across the NHS, government, and in strategy and regulations. He is a trusted advisor in digital health. He is a graduate of the first cohort of the NHS Digital Academy founding and a recent executive MBA graduate. Additionally, he is an expert in medical and digital technologies. He is specialized in their development, assessment, and delivery. In the field of medical device regulations, he is particularly knowledgeable about software as a medical device and AI as a medical device. I hope you'll enjoy this episode with me today with Dr. Paul Campbell. We certainly get to delve into the use of AI in a very specific aspect of our humanity, specifically healthcare, and also understand how governments are starting to approach the regulatory issue of AI tools in critical care. I hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks for joining us on SecureTalk. Hello, everyone, and welcome to SecureTalk. We're super excited to have you with us this week. Today, we're really excited to talk with Dr. Paul Campbell. Paul, welcome to SecureTalk today.
Thanks very much, Justin. Very kind of you to invite me onto your podcast.
Maybe. I think I make people nervous sometimes, but no, it's very kind of you to join us. We're ecstatic for you to share some of your story and your expertise and your perspective on the work that you do. And one of the things we love about SecureTalk is we get to meet people in the field that may have an impact on effective security, privacy, or other aspects of the broader marketplace that we operate in. Could you tell us a little bit about your origin story? How did you, when you look back over your career, what were some of those early milestones or interests or passions that you brought?
The simple background to the story is my career background, which has been rather long and winding. I'm not as young as I used to be. My background really is in healthcare. I started off initially in pharmacy, community pharmacy industry, hospital pharmacy, but pretty soon after that, I went back to medicine, so became a doctor, worked as a doctor in the NHS in Scotland. I've worked across various disciplines, mostly centred around sort of anaesthetics, critical care type stuff.
Okay.
and I did that for a couple of decades. So my background really is as a clinician.
Mm.
However, the evolution and the evolution in the clinical world brought me to have to deal with basically IT, and as is often the way, sometimes some things that frustrate you, you start to get involved in trying to make better. So I got involved in healthcare IT, and within my NHS roles, I had a number of jobs in health systems, both local, regional, national level, government level. I got involved with at one point the Scottish Health Technologies Group, healthcare technology assessment of digital tools, and along that journey, my journey also mirrored a sort of a mapping of the increased use of software and software dropping itself into the land of being regulated healthcare software. So I got involved at that stage. Led to me, having some contact with MHRA, and through that I was invited to be one of the expert advisors. The MHRA has some expert advisory groups. So I joined them as an expert advisor. And a couple of years ago, I joined MHRA on a secondment originally from the NHS to be a clinical advisor. And as it turned out, not long after that, I ended up as the head of software and AI within innovative devices at the MHRA. So that's been the transition of the career from a clinician to healthcare to healthcare IT, and then sort of regulated software, and increasingly that software now becomes sort of AI driven software as well. So that's the background and the reasons.
Long and winding road, to be sure, but there's something to the intersectionality of these experiences. I found too. I worked as a software engineer, then I gained some expertise in enterprise education technology and software. And it was the aggregate of the two expertise that allowed me to find some really interesting impact opportunities. I'm curious about one thing. I certainly have been one of the developers of machine learning, data science feature sets, and trying to deliver that as product. And I always think about the consumers on the other side. I think of medicine as being highly scientific, and the work in developing a treatment having a lot to do with what is effective. And certainly as a pharmacist, you must have been reading, what certain types of drugs may do. And even as a practitioner and anesthesiologist, you must have been thinking about what new innovations were coming out and what you thought might be useful. What did you think about the state of the information you were being provided in making those decisions? Was it, were there improvements that you saw, things you wanted to see?
So, my clinical practice goes back a number of decades. And in the beginning, much of it was driven by paper-based stuff, and much, back in the start point, it would be, printed off X-ray films and stuff like that. So I've seen the evolution from the sort of purely paper-based and non-digital worlds to all results provided digitally, X-rays, images, blood tests, etc. And now increasingly that moves into a world of sort of advanced analysis using sort of data, leading sort of clinical decision support, etc. So that has grown through my clinical career, and now I don't currently now work frontline clinically anymore, but I've seen that evolution go through, and that data is important. That information is important. That becomes the basis upon which people make decisions. And it's very important that information is correct. I suppose is the simplest thing to say.
Yeah. And I think one of the interesting parts of the communication, I'm sure that, actually, I have no idea, so you'll have to tell me, Paul. There's some amount of training in the medical field about how to consume that information and analyze it. But for example, when I once built a feature set that was a prediction of a human outcome in a job.
Okay.
And we, of course, would predict along a probability, the probability that this person will achieve in this way looks like this percent. And I was always stunned by how hard the conversation around even simple probabilities were, to lay people that may not have dealt with them Do you find in the medical field that people are coming out of training, schooling, having a good tool set around consuming the information?
Again, I'm thinking what I was taught and what I
Yeah,
learned, where I began, and how that progressed, and what I saw others do along the way, and I don't get, how has that changed the undergraduate career is really important topic, and what information goes into that. There are lots of challenges. There's too much information. You can't teach everything to everyone now,
yeah,
so it becomes really important. Back, you know, back at the start, I do remember, but it's pretty standard for all medical courses to have some sort of element of statistics in them, some
yeah,
sort of way of analysing data. So that is pretty standard, and usually through people's clinical careers, that they all maintain a certain amount of sort of awareness of that, and even clinical professional development. Some people become fairly highly expertise in the world of sort of evidence production, and some
yeah,
people are more likely, the consumers of that. I suppose the simplest things would it was more or less bound around the concepts of sort of sensitivity and specificity, certainly in my day. And of course, that is a certain amount of sort of probability within that. But I think the data system has evolved, the digital technologies have evolved now that there's a lot more information coming out of AI. There's a lot more need to analyze probabilities and where they came from and what does that mean. And I'm not heavily involved in the development of undergraduate curriculums, certainly not globally, but even within the UK. I know that there's a lot of discussion about how can we improve or change, or what do we need to improve or change within undergraduate curriculums to improve the ability to understand and consume data science, data knowledge, probability. If I can say one final thing, that's for clinical practitioners. I think we're now at the stage that there's also a call globally that's important to even consumers, patients. Like, there's a need for everyone to understand this probably better.
yeah. That resonates with me. In the United States, of course, we have this interesting uh, situation where manufacturers of drugs or devices or software can advertise, on
Mm-hmm.
TV. And I do get concerned that they don't have the expertise to weigh, the pros and cons of a certain treatment plan the way a doctor might. And certainly, I think in the U.S. we've decided that we're okay advertising the drugs, but then you can't. This is a layperson's perspective, but you can't get that, except for with a doctor's prescription. But I also wonder about undue influence, right? Like, the patient seeing something that feels like it would solve their problem, wanting that passionately, a doctor trying to get through their day, and perhaps, just trying to make muddle through, the afternoon. Yeah,
Yeah. So I think the system you described there isn't the system in the UK.
yeah,
We don't have that sort of direct advertising, so it's not something we're used to. But it's not unusual for people to speak to their clinical practitioners with knowledge of a product. A friend told them about, they found something on a website, etc. So that's pretty commonplace now, and I think most clinicians are pretty comfortable and relaxed with that. You ground it based on the simple principles of history, investigation, analysis, examination, diagnosis. Like, you ground it in all of that, and you've got this background science, and there are some things that carry more or less weight. Some bits of information are more pertinent to certain diagnoses or not. So people coming with a story, they often may have picked something that's not quite the right fit, maybe want it to be the right fit. And I think most clinicians are usually in a good position to explain if that isn't the right, diagnosis or treatment, and they're usually comfortable with that. Or alternatively, they're in a right position. Actually, that's a good spot. You've probably hit the nail on the head with that one, and that might be something worth trying. So my experience, and I believe most clinicians are relatively comfortable with that.
good. I think that's great to hear. Um, we I am a little curious about just AI broadly, as you said, and see what's being developed perhaps, or see what's trending, where the areas of research might be. When I started first working with data science type work or machine learning, what is now, I think, been termed AI, I'm loath to use that sometimes because I remember the old HAL 9000 computer. To me, that was true AI, and I don't think we're there yet. So, but it was interesting to me, definitely in developing models, how sometimes we might use a very esoteric modeling technique, but then we might go back to very simple statistical analysis, get the same level of accuracy out of it. And certainly we've seen a lot of growth in natural language processing and LLM. Although I think about certainly image analysis as being something that there's been a lot of innovation in the medical field around. Are there other areas, when you look at some of the broad strokes of AI tools, maybe beyond statistic analysis, are you seeing some of these tool sets having a bigger impact on healthcare?
Innovation, evolution, healthcare never stops. It's always sort of changing and improving, and sometimes not as fast as some people would like, but it certainly always innovates. So in the land of sort of AI tools or machine learning and all the different variants and versions of that, as you indicate, there are lots of different things. The simple one phrase AI does not really do justice to all the techniques that are available. But if we'll stick with that broad brush term with that understanding, the mainstay in healthcare at the moment globally, a lot of these tools in the AI space are really, as you said, around imaging and sort of imaging modalities, X-rays, CT scans, analysis, and beyond that. I think, to the best of my knowledge, I think probably 70-80% or so of the sort of AI tools in healthcare at the moment are in that imaging space. That's changing. I suppose it's changing in two ways. Like, it's still imaging, but it's maybe going broader into other aspects of imaging, or, parts of clinical practice that weren't really capable of using imaging or get much out of it. Maybe now they can. So it's still imaging, but a different version. And then there's other developments within the AI space that are not using imaging. They're using sort of more sophisticated analysis of data. For example, collections of clinical profiles, phenotypic profiles, so, related to the genetic profile of the patient, combined with, medicines, combined with other laboratory results, that sort of, that mixed bag in that sense of data that can come together to form part of clinical decision support, and even overlaying that with now AI analyzing sort of, patient symptoms as well. So that's all becoming more prevalent, I would say, and what's not entirely clear at this point is how fast that rate of change will be. Will always be a bit more predominantly imaging, even if that imaging is expansive, or will it even out? I don't think that's clear yet. It's a changing world.
Yeah, of course. And I can think of the major levers, right? We might develop new modeling techniques or statistical analysis with existing data. We may collect more precise data, better refined, more detailed, or a broader data set from more people. We could see that perhaps in DNA work, where we've been able to dramatically improve the databases of DNA information. So I'm a little curious. We'll switch gears a little bit to the MHRA and NHRA and some of the work that you do there. One of the things, and maybe I'm diving into the deep end of the pool too quickly, but I'm always curious about is you're working for the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency in the UK, but there's a real international nature to medical innovation, work, United States to other countries. COVID, I think, was a great example of this. We saw different solutions popping up from different countries. How do you manage the international nature of life sciences? And you may need to give us the fifth grader perspective of how someone brings an innovation from another country to the UK. Yeah.
Okay, right. I'll give him my best shot, but just a broad question there. So just suppose briefly just to start to position it. So yeah, I do indeed work for the MHRA, Medicine Healthcare Regulator, Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency in the UK. So we're the UK regulator for medicines, medical devices and blood components. And we effectively provide those regulations with, or that certain mechanisms these are pretty well established regulatory mechanisms. You know that most countries have slightly different versions, but they're all based on the same sort of themes. So these are well established, recognised regulatory concepts and guidance. So that's the background to that. Taking it onto the sort of the innovation and the international side to it. So it might help. My area of expertise is medical devices, maybe more than medicines or blood products. So if I can caveat it out in the space of medical devices. So where do we go with that in terms of innovation? We're actually, it's maybe just some useful background. We're in the process of changing our regulations in the UK at the moment. You know, so we have regulations that have been listing for a number of decades now. We currently run the regulations in the UK, a thing known as the UK MDR, UK Medical Device Regulations. They're actually from 2002. So we're in the process. We're already in the realms of updating those regulations. This is in the background of a public consultation that was carried out a few years ago. And we're bringing in sort of new changes to the regulations. You know, this year we're bringing in new changes to post-market surveillance, for example, which is like one of the, within the life cycle of your medical device, making sure that you can always ensure the safety, that you're always monitoring it and checking if anything's going wrong. And then we've got future sort of plans for regulations going in next year to, again, further enhance aspects of the sort of safety and the quality of the medical devices aligned with this new post-market surveillance. So we're in the process of a regulatory reform program. So that's where we are right now. As part of that, turn to the innovation side of it, that we're always, the whole global community, the regulatory community, is always trying to find out how can we improve the innovation, how can we make sure that we're keeping, safe, but also ensuring access to the latest of technologies, relevant technologies. So you have to at all times get that balance right of safety and access, as we call it, quality access. So we have a number of programs in MHRA that we're working on, one of which is actually another part of the agency. It's the IDAPS, the Innovative Device Access Pathway. And it's been up and running for several months now, over a year now, I think. And they're trying to bring like innovative products that somehow are fulfilling a sort of an unmet clinical need within the NHS. And so it's a sort of tightly sort of monitored program. And that's one of our aspects of it. How can we, in a focused way, bring innovative products, to the market safely but quickly? And other countries, in fairness to them, are doing similar type of programs. But IDAP's the one that we've got. We recently also launched a thing known as our AI Airlock. We call it the AI Airlock. That's a regulatory sandbox. People may have heard of this concept of regulatory sandbox. So that's where you're bringing regulators, manufacturers, innovators, developers, other types of regulators into a theoretical space to try out some of these new technologies. And for us, it's specifically AI medical devices.
Okay.
So we've recently opened that up as an application process for this week. In fact, we launched the application process for our AI Airlock. So, yeah, have a look on the website. Please apply.
I did not apply though, but I did read it. Yes. Good.
So again, and within that, what we're trying to do there is understand what regulatory challenges may exist, because we always need to sort of, some of these technologies maybe take the regulations to the edge of what the regulations were set up to do. So we need to understand that and work out what changes are required, whether that's the regulations or in fact just the guidance itself, or in fact we may expose that it's not really the regulations the problem, but it's some other piece of knowledge that's been missed and people need to understand. So we've got a couple of those programs, in that sort of innovative space within the regulatory reform. The last bit of your question, if I remember right, was that, how does all that play out in the international dimension?
Yeah.
So I've mentioned, I think, many regulators are trying to, do some of these innovative things, but they generally do that in a backdrop of sort of what's the global picture here. So the UK MHRA are one of the members of a thing known as the International Medical Device Regulators Forum, the IMDRF. So that's a sort of global medical device forum. It's aimed at trying to promote sort of convergence of sort of, good, effective, efficient regulations. It has a whole series of guidance documents to use as a baseline that all the global regulators to use. In fact, there's been this year, in fact, it's been sponsored. The chair of the chairs moves every year. So this year it was sponsored by FDA, and the UK will be taking their turn soon. And they have reviews constantly, sort of working groups within that, and we, across the different areas of all of medical devices, we are the co-chairs of the AI working group within IMDRF at the moment, and we're doing that as a co-chair alongside the US FDA, and we're working through a process to, usually it's a production of a guidance document. It goes out for sort of draft consultation. I think that consultation process is recently closed. We're doing an IMDRF version of what's known as sort of GMLP, the good machine learning principles. So at the moment, these are principles that we already, have published alongside the FDA and Health Canada, but that's now been sort of elevated to sort of IMDRF level, and we're the co-chairs of that. So that's the general mechanism that people follow to try and make sure there's sort of global harmonization, global alignment, and where we're at. Everyone does have slightly different regulatory laws and rules, but there's this definitely an aim to try and improve global harmonization.
First off, I love the rigor which with this has been developed. It's very obvious to me that, and now that I consider it, it should have been obvious a long time ago that medicine as a practice is steeped in ethics. I think it must have been centuries ago there was a discussion of the ethics in medicine and how we practice it well, and the profession has hung on to that as we think about industrialization of medicine in a way, and then back to personalization where we have specific devices and treatments that are being delivered. I have long complained in the computer science space broadly that we don't have a concept of ethics. I think many of us just starting playing with code, that was my background, and it led to developing software that was impactful to our fellow human beings and sometimes quite negatively. I'm especially my work in education and some human capital management work. I wish we would have had deep guidelines as practitioners, and as AI became prevalent in the work we were doing, it's even more critical because we don't consider safety over access. I think we considered access over all other problems because we felt like if we could deliver material to everyone, that negated the concern on the safety. And I think we've learned that that's just not true. Sure. It's a painful outcome. Yeah. So I did have a question about the AI Airlock a little bit. Is this more of kind of a working group? Or it sounds like it is a working group, but is there a technology component to it as well?
Can I ask you to clarify, what do you mean
Sure.
a technology component? Sorry.
Yeah. I have participated sometimes in like large working groups. And for example, if we were working together to develop a research project and there were going to be findings afterwards, we may pool our data into a singular database of what we were working on. And that database may have been set up by a cybersecurity expert for something that everyone was comfortable working on. And we'd have to negotiate, how we were keeping private information protected or what fields we would ask for or not ask for so that we could operate from a singular data set. It sounds like from your question back to me that AI Airlock might be more interested in what you're working on first and then deciding if there's some componentry to that.
Okay, maybe the best way to take it is to what we're trying to do with it and what sort of things we'll be looking at and what mechanisms will we use to do that. That might be a helpful way to explain this. So first, as I said, we're trying to understand challenges that people may or may not be having within regulations. The reason I say may or may not is because I think we do have some experience that people say that, regulations are problems and are barriers. And I think that's a misperception at times. I think that's not necessarily the case. It's not that the barrier isn't the regulation. The barrier is that there's some piece of information that you don't know. And that's one thing. So that's the general concept. And then but we do wish to stress those regulations, work out where the bounds are and work out, does anything need to be changed? And I think so there'll be a combination of sort of some outcomes here that, we will all learn from, things that we all need to know, things that we need to improve in guidance, and there may be change in regulations. These are the general concepts of all regulatory sandboxes. So what we're looking for is for people to apply who they're in the AI medical device space. They are having, from their side of things, innovators, developers, manufacturers, a problem, a challenge, something that they're not managing to deal with. And then we'll take the best sort of portfolio collection of those and bring them into the 2 or 3 different areas that we're looking at. So one of them is really looking at that sort of, early space, that real sort of almost people who, things like this at more of a concept level, like they may not have any access to sort of real live data or anything yet. This is an AI tool that they want to develop, and they're trying to work out, they've already hit a barrier, but they don't even know where to go with that. Yeah. In some ways, that's like a tabletop, desktop, scenario, hypothetical scenario to talk through, and we can work through that. Then you're getting more onto the next bunch of people who are maybe, mid-process of their development program, and they already have access to that data that you're talking about. Like, they're trying to deal with and manage that data, and they're maybe finding some problems about how to handle their product with this data in this regulated environment. And we will, take a collective review of that. And when I say collective review, we will have a fairly significant bunch of parties involved in this. So ourselves, MHRA as regulator, but also in the UK, medical devices in the UK are technically approved by authorised bodies. Well, there's 2 sorts. The lower risk ones are sort of self-certified, but the higher risk ones are approved by what we call approved bodies. These are sort of independent entities that do the analysis of the safety of these products. So they have a collective group known as Team AB, so they're in there with us as well. We've also got some pretty hardcore data experts that we've got involved from some of our other services in MHRA and associated bodies. We've got some academic experts as well, particularly in the sort of AI space. So we've got, and people have previously been innovators, so we've got a range of people that are going to help with the applicants who bring the problem. They've got access to data, they're trying to manage it, they're struggling to work out how this will satisfy or provide what they need for regulatory status. So that'd be the other camp. And then I suppose the third one would be more sort of, and these are broad brush camps. Like, this is not to say this is exactly, we see this as sort of 3 mechanisms. We'll be prepared to and able to flex between that depending on what the answer is. But we're looking at these sort of 3 stages almost. And then people who've got maybe a much more advanced product, it's maybe a product that's already on the market, but what they want to do is extend the functionality of their product. Maybe move from being something in workflow with humans to something being automated, and how do we do that within the realms of the regulations, within the realms of safety and sort of evidence base. So in our head, we've got, right from the start of the products all the way through. So we see that sort of 3 broad categories, and we're going to work with that and make sure that we, as best we can, share the outputs of the learning from that for all parties.
Yeah, I think I understand much better now how what you're doing is kind of fast analysis, but effective analysis, like staged analysis, for some of these organizations that don't fit the mold of the regulatory process in a way, so that you can invite them into a regulatory process that still brings deep scrutiny, but also some experts from the regulatory agency to analyze how the regulatory process is functioning for them.
You made an interesting statement there, don't fit the mold of the regulatory process. And the regulatory process is a fairly principled and a scientifically driven process to sort of aim at providing safety and quality. And, many people within the medical device world, many people that you mentioned earlier, the medicines world, these are well-established processes. However, we are in fact often now dealing with people who come more from a software world into the healthcare world, and they may not be used.
Yeah.
No, which is fine. That's great. You're welcome. Please, you're helping us solve problems.
Okay, good.
But for people coming into that world, it's like they land in this new regulated world. I would argue one of the very frequent problems that we have is software developers in the healthcare space that literally their start of the journey is they don't even know that they're in a regulated space. Like they don't recognize that the software tools they're developing may qualify as medical devices. That's probably, in fact, one of our most frequent areas that we have to cover.
Of course, we in my work, we help companies with compliance, and sometimes that's regulatory, some form of legal compliance. And it's funny, I have come across a couple of fast-moving VC-funded startups that are building a device or software that impacts health, and I agree. I think they're excited about what they're building. Writing the code is easy in a lot of ways, but the impact of what we do, I think as a field, again, I'll level my complaint at ourselves as a innovation industry. We rarely think about the ethics, I think, and I have personally been involved in projects that I regret, and now looking back, that I wish I would have had some even broad ethical guidelines about what to do and how to participate. As a matter of fact, you mentioned something that I found really brilliant, the good machine learning practice for medical device development that you all have been working on. I think there's 10 principles. Is that right, Paul? Yeah. I think I read through them and I was like, man, I wish all of us that were working on AI would adopt all of these principles. I think, even if we weren't building a medicine or a medical device or medical software, that they're applicable. And so I thought if you're open to it, we might highlight a couple that I think are really valuable. One that stood out to me that I think is a mistake a lot of my software developers turned data scientists that I meet do is, and the way it's stated for medical is clinical study participants and data sets are representative of the intended patient population. Tell us a little bit about, from maybe a medical or regulatory perspective, how you perceive this or even why it might be valuable. What's your perspective on this particular guideline?
So, thanks for mentioning the GMLP principles. As I said, we have these were published a couple of years ago now, and before that, actually, between ourselves, Health Canada and FDA, and I have to give credit to the colleagues that did them. It was before my time, to be honest. We are now working with IMDRF. There's been a public consultation of the draft of that because we want these to, just make sure they're completely up to date and make sure we can, make them aligned with this sort of global harmonization aim, because we feel that they are very good, useful, valid principles. You touched on one. Clinical study participants. The phrasing is the intended patient population. So there's a phrase in sort of medical device regulations, either quoted as intended use or intended purpose. They're used fairly interchangeably. Different countries use it differently. So the way I like to think of it is like, I imagine a world where people say, I've got this amazing product. It does this great stuff. It cures problems in health. Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. But what exactly does it cure? Or what does it fix? And who exactly does it do that for? Because there's no major panacea that this is, take this one drop of liquid in your drink each day and we'll all be super healthy all of the time. Generally, the way healthcare products work is that they're directed to a specific problem in a specific group of patients. So in the intended purpose, in fact, we also have guidance about that in our MHRA webpage about, we call it intended purpose. It's usually broken down across a number of things, looking at sort of, age, the age of the population, even the ethnicity of the population. So bias can be really important, particularly in AI products. We also look at, I'm straying a wee bit from the GMLP principles here, but just into this concept of intended purpose, what exactly does it do? Who are the patients that it uses in? That's this patient population. What's the environment that you use it in as well? So this wider context of intended use, intended purpose is to make people think that you're developing a product, you're going to have to prove what it does and to which particular group of people, because then with that, you've got some evidence that you can say, well, we're assured that it can do these things in that group of people. And I think experience has told us that many sort of IT projects, healthcare software IT projects and software and AI projects, they start off with a very broad brush of like, oh, this is going to cure X for everyone type thing. And the bottom line is that's really hard to prove, So that's one of the reasons for that principle. It's well established from the world of medicines that you mentioned earlier on as well. So
yeah, certainly on the technology development side, in the pursuit of billions of dollars of value, we are, as founders or technology company leaders, we're enticed to build what we call the largest total addressable market, because I think the business folks believe there's a relationship with how valuable a company can be to the amount of people that you can provide that service solution for. But it infects things in the wrong way. And I'll give you a personal example that I've seen is we were building some hiring models at a prior company, and I was really rigorous about the accuracy measurement on those models because we were very new to it. The data was very new, and I was unsure about the applicability of a single model. One of the really interesting things that we found is we could have two different banks. They could be very similar, very large banks, multinational banks, and we're looking at the same job title. And we would build a model for prediction on the same job title at both those banks. But we found dramatic accuracy differences when we looked at the two different populations, because all of a sudden we realized that the treatment for this bank was unique for the people they wanted to hire compared to the other bank. And that was dangerous. People didn't get a job that should have gotten a shot because we were building these predictions. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you've just touched on a point there, Justin, which is like many people who are in the field know and recognise this, that there can be quite a brittleness or a fragility to the data science world. You can prove a thing in a certain set of circumstances. You can be pretty robust about that. But it can often take not very much in the way of a change in one element, and you can get quite different outcomes. So that remains to my mind, actually, it's a problem for us in terms of medical devices and quality and safety. But I think it's a data science problem, which I'll turn it back to colleagues such as yourself that are data science experts to try and tell us how to improve that.
Well, I think we forget the science part, which is we need to test. I get frustrated when we assume, and I assume sometimes, but I wish we would think about it more as a thesis than a fact when we imagine what might be possible and something to test and requiring accurate information for a result. Yeah. There was another one that I thought was really good, which is testing demonstrates device performance during clinically relevant conditions.
That's particularly pertinent. Healthcare is provided in a number of different sort of means and a number of different settings and sort of timelines as well. So, that people probably fairly familiar with shows like the family doctor and the GP, primary care, the general practitioner, and then there's sort of secondary care, which is more advanced hospital. And then there's even tertiary level care, high level specialist care. And then there's time critical care, sort of emergency department care and trauma stuff. So all these environments make a difference. And when your software gives answers, it has to be thought through about the relevance of that information, the need for the certain level of accuracy required, the interjection of that information at the right time in a time critical or environment context sensitive manner. The last group in that is increasingly we've got, care being provided directly to patients or consumers. And again, we touched on this back at the start about the the level of knowledge you have to understand these probabilistic answers that you may be getting. What does that mean? What do I do with it? So it has to be, giving an ECG to a professor of cardiology versus giving an ECG to a primary school child is going to get two very different interpretations, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So that context of the environment is really, really important, and it has to be thought through. Sometimes, medical devices are in risk categories, and one of the features that's taken into consideration is that sort of the criticality of the timely nature of this. So you're building your tool, we ask people, what does it do? What's its intended use? What's the purpose? What's the intended population? And what's the intended environment that you want to use it in? Because there's no point in proving that you can use this perfectly in a, very sterile benchtop test environment. And then you try and transpose that into a very busy emergency department with multiple streams of information coming at you. These things, it's been, I think many people will recognize this. You go from that sort of benchtop lab environment, you put it in the real world, and suddenly your model doesn't work as you thought it intended to. So that's why, as a principle, you need to try and prove it in the right environment.
Again, this is something that just resonates with me broadly as computer science work and some of the work on data science. I've just seen us develop models, and they're oftentimes developed in a very sterile environment. We have a data set. We're going to train a model on it. We're going to test that model with a segmented data set to see how accurate its results were. Sometimes we don't even do that if we feel like the results are qualitative as opposed to quantitative. Very frustrating to me, because I think there are ways to drive at a qualitative. Like if you had an AI tool that's a large language model, like a natural language processing model, and you said, write a paragraph about that thing, there are ways to get to quantitative analysis on the effectiveness of it, right? Like I could go bring in, 25 English teachers to grade it on its ability to write that paragraph and receive some quantitative analysis on the accuracy of response. But I think too often we don't care about both that accuracy and how accurate it is in the environment, because we think it works the same way when we deploy it. But if you've got someone consuming that information, and let's say that it is a essay grading tool, in the moment of the essay grading tool, if you find that your recommendation was to use the high level value, did they get an A, a B, or a C, to help guide your reading of the information, but we see teachers just plowing right through it, say A, B, A, B, A, B, without, working in the context, you've got to remove that overarching value. Because in the context of a teacher trying to grade something, they're going to high center on it and not do the rest of the analysis. And I don't think data scientists in the software world think about that impact, the contextualization of the consumption of these predictions we make. Yeah.
I mean, like AI, data science has been around for decades. It's not new.
It's not new. Yeah.
For a number of reasons, it's becoming much more prevalent, and it in and of itself as a science is advancing rapidly. And I think that's part of the learning, the amazing information that can be garnered out of collections of data, out of good data science techniques can be hugely beneficial to healthcare. There's no sort of real debate about that.
Yeah.
But it is that's on its own journey of evolution towards okay, so how do we use that data? How do we make sure that it's contextualized? How do we make sure it's appropriate for the environment? How do we make sure it's used in the right way on the right people? I think that's part of the evolution of the whole data science AI journey, which, as you say, is grounded in those GMLP, good machine learning principles.
Yeah. Well, Paul, I want to thank you for coming into this particular conversation with your background. And I also want to thank the amazing work at the MHRA that you do and that you do in ensuring that we have safe and effective practices, and also an opportunity to bring innovation to the broader marketplace. I think I also, in just reading about the organization and yourself and some of your work, there's a deep transparency to the work you're doing. And I think that drives a lot of trust, both in practitioners and consumers. So I'm grateful for it. And of course, for SecureTalk, we're really grateful for you joining and sharing your expertise and perspective on these things. I think it's very helpful. And I hope that broadly, those of us that work in the computer science space will adopt better ethics in the work that we do. And that was part of my interest in chatting with you today. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Justin. It's been a pleasure to speak to yourself and colleagues in SecureTalk. So I hope that's been useful. Yeah, it's really good to hear that you guys are interested in sort of safe and effective products to help us in healthcare. So thank you very much.
Yeah, trying. We're always improving, right? Yeah.
Very grateful.